So now, without further delay, let's begin today's event, sponsored by Achievers and hosted by Employee Benefit News. It's my pleasure to introduce your moderator for today and speaker. That is Brie Harvey, resident in-house thought leadership expert on recognition and engagement strategy with Achievers. Brie, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Greg. I learned something new today. Whenever Greg and I were talking before we went live, he was like, "Are you on a headset or a handset?" And I was like, "What's a handset?" He was like, "A phone that you put up to your face." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so used to being around so many young people at work." I was like, "Oh, it's so nice." He was like, "How old are you?" And I was like, "I'm young. I didn't know what a handset was." It seems so archaic to have a phone up to your face. A little bit about me, as Greg mentioned, my name is Brie Harvey, and I work for Achievers. I spent the first couple of years in my career working in talent acquisition before moving into onboarding and learning and development. I do a lot of things at Achievers, but a great deal of my work is focused on creating and delivering training content around trends in human capital management, particularly around employee motivation strategies and how to foster a culture where people show up to work every day and feel inclined to give their best effort for a reason other than money. And on a personal note, I'm extremely interested in this topic, not just because I find the psychology of it all deeply fascinating, but because earlier in my career, I worked in a job that was so disturbingly stressful. It had a really toxic environment, and every single Sunday afternoon around 2 p.m., like clockwork, I would start to get the pit in my stomach. No matter what I tried to do to distract myself and be present and emotionally decompartmentalize, my anxiety would grow as the minutes ticked by, and I would be thinking about all that I had to do the next day. The approach at that particular organization I was working for to motivating their employees was very fear-based and punitive. And I'm kind of thankful in a way that I had that experience because I really have a deep level of empathy and a great understanding of how a toxic environment can impact the quality of a person's life. In contrast, I've been working for Achievers in our San Francisco office I just had my 4-year anniversary 2 weeks ago, and I do not have a combination of words to describe how much the people here and the culture light me up inside. I have this moment sometimes when I'm on my way to work in the morning when I'm reflecting about what I need to get done. Sometimes it's like annoying, boring stuff. A lot of times it's really exciting and fun. But I'll have this moment when my mind will project that first second when I walk into the door and I see all the smiling, dumb faces of the beautiful people I love so much, and my heart expands. Honestly, I know it sounds so cheesy, but my heart honestly expands in my chest because I'm so grateful for them and to be a part of an environment where I can show up as my most authentic self and my contributions and talents are genuinely appreciated and being used towards something I really believe in, which is changing the way the world works, our mission. So I could not be any more thrilled to be a part of today's discussion. Achievers works with a lot of best-in-class global organizations, and we have spent an exorbitant amount of time and effort analyzing the data, looking at trends within our customer base and elsewhere, and reflecting best-in-class companies can do to elevate their recognition strategy to the point where it's transformative and having a measurable impact on business metrics outside of HR. And I firmly believe that success leaves clues. So a little bit about the agenda of what we're going to be covering today. First, we're going to talk about why on earth a company would invest in a formal recognition program to begin with, then explore why it's so important to get measures of program success right if the goal is to not have those programs fail. Then we're going to spend a little bit of time looking at what the actual science says about recognition effectiveness and explore the different types of recognition and why it's important to distinguish between them. Spoiler alert, not all recognition is created equal. And then we'll close out with talking about 3 of the key pillars of program success to get recognition right. And then we'll have time to answer hopefully a number of Q&As. So as Greg mentioned, as we kind of go through the content, as questions pop up or points of clarification, please pop them in the chat box and we will get to them at the end. So here's the situation on the ground. A vast majority of organizations in industrialized countries have some form of recognition. Typically, it's a mix of formal and informal programs. Many people on this call may be familiar with the fact that every other year, World at Work, which is a leading nonprofit association made up of HR professionals, that's really one of the world's leading thought leaders on the topics of compensation, benefits, and total rewards. They published a comprehensive report titled Trends in Employee Recognition. And earlier this year, in some of their more recent findings, they had a graph that basically broke down the fact that although some respondents feel their programs, their recognition programs are doing an okay of meeting their goals, there's a lot of room for improvement, with only about 18% of HR leaders saying their investment in recognition is definitely meeting the goals that the program had in the first place. That's a pretty scary reality for the HR practitioner who may be in a spot where they're kind of thinking about how to elevate their current recognition strategy or making an investment in a formalized recognition program. It's scary to think about the fact it's kind of easy to spend a ton of money and time and energy on building out a recognition program without getting real results. And if there's one thing all HR practitioners have in common across all industries, whether here in healthcare or retail, it's that we loathe wasting money on employee programs that people don't use. So it kind of begs the question, why, if only 18% of HR leaders who have taken the plunge and implemented employee recognition programs are claiming they're seeing results and the strategic value they're hoping for, why, according to Burson by Deloitte, is employee recognition a $46 billion industry? First of all, I think it's helpful to take a step back and look at the reasons why an organization would invest in recognition programs to begin with. Last year, one of my favorite analysts, Gartner, published this white paper where they explored how in recent times philosophies of recognition and reward practices have evolved significantly. They talk about a lot of different reasons, but one of them is that people aren't routinely showing up to the same job for 10, 20, 30 years. And if I tell you, hey, I'm going to give you a watch or let you pick from a limited selection of lifestyle awards if you stay here for 15 years, I guarantee you that will not result in you giving discretionary effort in your role. It's not going to cause you to have a deeper emotional commitment to your company and its goals. So it's interesting that when you look at that same report from World at Work when they polled HR professionals about what their objectives were for implementing a recognition program just 2 years ago. Almost 80% of people cited that implementing and recognizing years of service was a goal. Even more interesting, when you look at some of these other reasons on the list, there's a lot of soft benefits, such as create a positive work environment or culture, build a culture of recognition, reinforce desired behaviors. These are all really valiant and important goals, but how do you track something as fluffy as support organizational mission and values? Circling back around to what Gartner published last summer in this study, is one of my favorite things that they did is they explored the 4 different use cases of rewards and recognition, which they denote to be improved policy compliance with things like health and safety, enhancing operational performance and incentives so that they're kind of standardized and streamlined. They talked about the importance of complementing the talent augmentation process and improving employee engagement. And as you can see on the bottom here, they kind of talk about the various levels of impact for each of those use cases, and kind of from low to high. And although I found this white paper to be really comprehensive and great, I recommend that you check it out. In my personal experience, closely analyzing Achiever's customer base, which includes over 300 of some of the largest global enterprise organizations in the world, I find it to be even more simple, and it could be boiled down to 3 things. The first is at the tactical level that unfortunately just sits within HR, and that involves consolidating and streamlining recognition and reward programs across a business so that they're easy to administer, the employee experience is standardized and equitable. It doesn't matter if you are showing up to work in one department or with one particular manager. It kind of levels the playing field to ensure that everyone, regardless of job title or level or location, has the opportunity to be recognized. Also, other benefits of consolidation include that you're setting yourself up to be tax compliant with rewards or the taxable benefits component, which is all very good, but again, this pain point lies very much within the HR level. Most C-level executives are going to be losing sleep over the fact that HR is experiencing a heavy amount of administrative burden to oversee kind of a manual, homegrown approach. The second reason why most organizations invest in recognition and rewards technology has to do with either improving value alignment or culture. A lot of times, especially within larger organizations, when everything is spread out across geographically dispersed locations, or the organization is interested in breaking down silos that exist from department to department, or perhaps the company is growing through acquisition and they want to ensure that the mission and values of the organization stay front and center through a lot of change as they assimilate new employee populations. Again, all of these are important goals, but by definition, they're soft benefits. And it can be tough to measure and translate how unifying culture or improving value alignment, how you can translate that into KPIs that a CFO or a CEO will respond to. Luckily, the last reason why companies will make this type of investment has to do with moving the needle on a strategic goal of the business through recognition, whether that's increasing employee engagement or increasing employee retention. I'm going to unpack this a little bit further because it sort of brings me to my first reason why most companies aren't seeing a definite return on investment in the recognition program, and it has to do with the way that they're measuring the success of the program. Measuring the success of a recognition program needs to be measured in business outcomes outside of the program, outside of adoption of the program and number of recognition nominations and HR. When you look at going back to that World at Work study, where it kind of suggested, like, hey, when they asked HR practitioners what were your objectives in having this recognition program in place to begin with, and you look at what HR practitioners and the business was looking to invest in, recognizing years of service, reinforcing desired behaviors. Again, a lot of the things on this list are fluffy and difficult for C-levels to understand. And I can't stress enough, it's not that these are bad. In fact, we have a lot of heartwarming examples of how our own customers have had their cultures really impacted by the program that we partnered with them to build. One example that I really love is ATB Financial. One thing that's important to their strategy as a business is corporate responsibility, and they partner with Habitat for Humanity and offer a number of volunteer days throughout the year and try to encourage their people to get out and help serve those underserviced communities. And we had C-level executives go on record about how special it is to come in on a Monday morning and kind of, be scrolling through the news feed and see it lit up with pictures and images of ATB Financial employees out in the field post a volunteer day giving back. And it's this beautiful reflection and amplification of their culture, which is awesome. However, when you are being accountable to procurement and your C-levels, those nice, kind of feel-good stories are, again, a nice to have. However, they're not a true or reliable form of a measure of success. In order to set yourself up so you have visibility in whether or not your recognition program is making an impact, it has to be measured and tracked against KPIs and business outcomes that have a proven impact over the financial trajectory of the business, whether that's employee retention, customer satisfaction scores, etc. A few examples of how we have done this within our own customer base. So this particular customer has about 17,000 employees globally. They're actually a large retailer. And one thing that was very important to them as a business is turnover, as it is in most companies, but especially in retailer, where turnover is astronomical. And what we were able to do is actually map manager sent recognition with turnover data in real time, and we showed a clear correlation across 88 locations that when managers recognize 1.8 times more than their counterparts, turnover decreased up to 40% less. Another example that has to do with more engagement happened at one of our larger healthcare organizations that have around 200,000 employees globally. Something that's interesting about this particular program is that it's a social-only program, meaning it doesn't incorporate monetary recognition into the recognition landscape. And when we mapped employee engagement scores with social recognition, that is non-monetary recognition, we found that associates who had averaged at least one recognition per month were 43% more engaged than their counterparts. So, summary, it would be difficult to overstate the fact that you're not setting yourself up to get a measurable ROI unless if you're tracking and consistently measuring the success of your recognition program with metrics outside of the program. Of course, it's important to get visibility on adoption metrics and the metrics that you can get within the program to help inform your communication strategy and make sure that employees are routinely using it. However, it's not the way that you're going to make a transformative impact at your organization. The next reason why most recognition programs don't yield a measurable ROI, and arguably I would say the most important factor, has to do with the fact that not all recognition is created equal. Although a lot of HR practitioners will point to the mountain of scientific evidence, whether you're looking at thought leadership from Gallup or Harvard Business Review, third-party analyst data, academic research, it's resoundingly clear that the evidence showcases that recognition is one of the top drivers of employee engagement and performance. In fact, Aon Hewitt, every other year they put out an extremely comprehensive study on engagement trends. They published this report, and that always has this section highlighting the biggest opportunities to impact engagement, and recognition consistently ranks at the top of the list, regardless of the sector of the economy that you work in, regardless of job function or job level, age demographic of your employees, or your corporate culture. Recognition unequivocally and measurably has proven time and time again to impact turnover, employee performance, revenue growth, value alignment. Literally every single business metric a company would care to measure in the first place. But all recognition, again, is not created equal. There's a really good reason for that sticks above the rest. And it has to do with the fact that recognition does not work unless if it's regular. I'm going to repeat that. I work for a recognition company, and I'm telling you that recognition doesn't work. It's a worthless investment unless it occurs at a certain frequency. And absolutely nothing in life works unless it's regular. Learning a new language, training your dog, communicating with your partner. You would never expect to transform your body through exercise by going to the gym 6 times a year. Your employees are no different. And even like aside from the science, or even aside from the common sense, the science is clear that in order to have a sustaining, lasting impact on engagement, recognition has to be frequent. And we need to change the way that we define recognition frequency and the way that we're thinking about recognition. All of the wonderful benefits of recognition are unfortunately extremely short-lived, much, much shorter than organizations previously assumed just 8 years ago. When you look at the neuroscience of what happens in the brain when someone receives a recognition, two things are clear. There's a little uptick in dopamine that results in an emotional high and contributes to creative problem solving, improved performance, a sense of belonging and purpose, etc. And then poof, it's gone almost as quickly as it came in. But you don't even need to look at the vast amount of scientific journals and academic literature that resoundingly tells the story that recognition doesn't have an impact when it's only happening 6 times a year. I want you to think back on a time when you've been recognized in a transparent way that was really specific about how your behavior helped out with like a project or a company goal. Hopefully everyone here has experienced that unique emotional high and what it felt like to go home that day, and maybe if it was a written recognition, kind of reflect on the words that were written about you. But if you think back on how you felt, and if you're totally honest with yourself, how wonderful it was, it's actually pretty fleeting, which is why Gallup recommends employees should be recognized every 7 days. Our benchmark across our customer base is at least 1 unique received recognition per month. If you're sitting there thinking, yeah, okay, I can buy into this conceptually, but in actuality, doing that frequent of recognition would never work at my company with our managers or with our leaders. I can barely get them to fill out like nomination forms once or twice a year, and it certainly wouldn't work with our limited budget. I want you to really pay attention to this next slide. In order to understand why recognition programs aren't set up from the beginning, it's helpful to first take a step back and think about the evolution of recognition and the fact that there are 3 categories or paradigms of recognition models. Starting with recognition 1.0, which we briefly touched upon a little bit earlier. As everyone on this call, I'm sure, is more than familiar with, for a long time, the prevailing method of quote-unquote recognizing and rewarding employees involved the service anniversary. And although those still can have a place of being one component of company culture and the overarching recognition strategy, it has long been proven as simply not enough to transform culture or impact business outcomes. I would say around in the mid-2000s, this notion that arbitrarily awarding employees showing up to work for a specific duration of time, possibly with a company, token or a trophy, wasn't enough. This notion gained steam, and many companies adopted a recognition 2.0 model, which a lot of companies still maintain this approach, and this is indicative of the fact that there will be sometimes a modernized component to the program where they digitize their years of service and they have better rewards, and often the recognition kind of ecosystem will involve a mix of different types of recognition programs, such as nomination-based awards or spot bonuses. Perhaps managers have a drawer full of gift cards and they throw pizza parties, or are trying to get employees excited about an effective shared bonus program. Oftentimes in a recognition 2.0 paradigm, there'll be a mix a mixed bag in terms of what level of technology has introduced. Sometimes companies will have invested in a formalized, quote-unquote, recognition program that centralizes all their dispersed recognition initiatives and programs across the business so that it's in one spot for employees to find and is easy for administrators to kind of oversee and get line of sight into budget. Other times, companies, especially smaller ones, will have more of a homegrown approach that HR kind of wears the burden of administering. The thing about this approach that is significant to note is even if there's some kind of element of quote-unquote peer-to-peer recognition that involves, people nominating their peers and having managers approve it, it's still very, very much top-down and hierarchical. Another big indicator that an organization is lingering somewhere in the recognition 2.0 paradigm, it has to do with rewards and the fact that rewards are, their focus is really emphasizes monetary recognition, and culturally, the employees haven't really decoupled the recognition from the reward, and recognition hasn't truly been democratized, and sometimes this can result in a culture of reward expectancy, or even worse yet, entitlement, or at the very extreme end, resentment or jealousy. And so, the biggest thing in closing about recognition 2.0 is that if the recognitions are not happening frequently, if you're measuring recognitions received or rewards received annually instead of monthly, you know that you are 1,000% in this recognition 2.0 paradigm. And honestly, the market is saturated with recognition solutions that are perfectly fine if you're looking to take a check-the-box approach to have some kind of recognition in place and you're not looking to impact any strategic level goals such as profit growth or employee engagement, retention, performance, etc. However, if you're looking to actually move the needle in a meaningful way and have a transformative impact on culture and really get an ROI on your investment, recognition has to fall in alignment with a recognition 3.0 model, which is indicative of when recognitions are employee-centered, free-flowing, and really emphasizing that non-monetary, daily, values-driven recognition. Of course, recognition 3.0 does, there is still value in maintaining and streamlining some of those more prestigious, traditional top-down recognition programs, such as nomination-based awards, years of service, etc. However, we know, based off of specializing in building recognition strategies for some of the largest, most progressive organizations in the world, that the secret sauce really boils down to a few different things, 3 different things to be specific. The first has to do with adoption. We all know that the foundation of any successful program, whether it's an LMS system, a wellness program, etc., starts with building and sustaining really high adoption. However, we know the way that adoption should be thought about and measured is different. There is something to be said about having high activation. You need to aim for that upon launch. The average adoption across our customer base after day 90 is 94% adoption, but we believe that a much more indicative measure of adoption is actually monthly active usage, which is the percentage of employees who are actually showing up to the program on a monthly basis and using it. Activating their account, it's like, that's good. We want them to do that. But really, if you're looking for the program to become embedded within your organization and really bring your values alive, the usage has to be regular. And in terms of our benchmark for monthly active usage, our average across our customer base, our average benchmark is 50%, but we have customers that have as high as 6% monthly active users. And in fact, we kind of designed the compensation package of our customer success team to be directly in alignment with the most important levers of program success, including monthly active usage. The second component of a really successful recognition program has to do with designing and optimizing the budget to deliver recognition frequency versus pushing awards. There's a lot of very well-known thought leadership on employee motivation that shows that rewards aren't effective with impacting employee performance and engagement. And in fact, there's a lot of studies that kind of look at the impact of incentives and performance, and a lot of them tell the story that sometimes they end up encouraging the wrong kind of behavior and having an adverse impact on performance. So, yeah, basically recognition needs to be non-monetary, and although there can be a reward component, there should be a reward component. The way that our most successful customers have approached it is they've taken our recommendation to actually set lower dollar rewards so that they can achieve recognition frequency that is going to actually impact their business. One of our customers, Kellogg's, actually said it the best. Liz said, do you want to reinforce, like say for example you have $100 per employee. What I was saying is, do you want to reinforce your employees for great work 4 times a year at $25 throughout the year, or do you want to reinforce them and motivate them 20x times throughout the year with the same recognition spend? Although to some cultures that have more of a rewards-centric approach to rewards may feel like, oh, like $5 for a monetary recognition sounds really low. We actually find it to be quite effective because you think about the collective impact of getting those small hits, and over time when you're being recognized frequently, your piggy bank kind of builds up and you can redeem or cash out for a bigger ticket item, a reward that actually means something to you and that you're going to use and it's going to be meaningful. The other really big approach that has to be considered when making recognition frequent and making the program a success has to do with leading with non-monetary peer-to-peer recognition. The research is clear that when recognitions are public and really specific about how the observed behavior impacted X, a project, a goal, it's just as powerful in terms of creating a temporary uptick in performance or employee engagement than providing rewards or cash. In fact, if you look at what happens under an MRI scan, at what happens in the brain when someone is recognized publicly in a meaningful way, versus if they find out they got a 1% increase in their salary. It's clear that non-monetary recognition, when it's done right and it has that transparent component and the recognitions are meaningful and not like, hey, thanks for bringing me donuts, it can be and it is transformative. I know that we're getting at time, so I'm not going to get into too many examples within our customer base of how we've done this. I do want to leave some time for a few questions I see here in the chat box, but kind of in summary, there's two things I really like to encourage you to walk away from today's presentation with. The first is 6 recognitions per year doesn't cut it. Recognizing your people 6 times a year will have the exact same impact as you hoping to lose weight and watching what you eat for 6 meals a year. Not all recognition is created equal. A comprehensive recognition strategy that's built to actually drive business outcomes and employee engagement has to be centered around encouraging frequent, non-monetary recognition that is free-flowing and yet specific. The other big one, I see my animations are backwards, but the other huge takeaway that I would love to wash over you for you to think about is the fact that the success of a recognition program is deemed to fail to begin with if the measures of success don't reflect the business KPIs that you're looking to drive. Just measuring adoption and recognition, nominations or recognitions received is not business success. That's program success. And with that, I'm going to take some of your questions. I'm going to take this one first, which is in referencing this study where you showed manager recognition impacted turnover, how did you calculate that? I know which slide that you're talking about. It was like 40% reduction of turnover when recognition levels for managers was like 1.8 times higher. That's a really good question. And the answer to that is that our offering has something called an HRIS integration so that the employee file and our platform, our recognition platform, talk in real time so that we and our customers can get real-time visibility in how recognition levels are impacting turnover. So say, for example, I'll just like pause and say, for example, an employee changes locations or like they get moved to a different team or they change job titles, our system is automatically going to know that because they are, automatically talking in real time. And actually that is not that's nothing unique to Achievers. Like most recognition providers will offer that type of integration. One thing that is unique about our approach is how we use that data. We have a research arm of our organization called the Workforce Institute that's made up of a bunch of very smart data scientists and our chief workforce scientists, and we work with you to strategically identify which kind of KPIs you should be mapping your recognition data to so that you can be agile with things like your retention strategy. So yeah, that is a really good question. I hope that I answered it. And one last thing that I'll mention, I see that we have a lot of questions, and I don't think we're going to get to all of them. I promise you, any questions that we don't get to, you have my commitment that someone on our end will reach out to you and answer your questions. Okay, question number 2. Curious to know if you think that there's such a thing as too much recognition. Can too much recognition actually serve to diminish the value of recognition? That is a great question, and actually one of the more common questions that we get. And I can say that we have never in our 20 plus years of being in the recognition space had a customer that complained about too much recognition, because the benefits of recognition are always going to be positive. The other thing to note is that all the recognitions are value-based, meaning you can't even send a recognition unless if it's tied to one of your core values. So it's not like people are thanking each other for arbitrarily things that aren't moving the business forward. That being said, definitely, in talking to a lot of customers, there are occasions within the first 6 months of going live or a year of going live where sometimes people will send recognitions that are kind of fluffy and not following our best practices of being specific. And that's just an indication that we kind of have the burden of stepping up our game and having a little bit of an education moment and reminding an employee base the use case of why to send recognition. Basically, it's a continuous thing. You never just launch it and leave it and expect people to remember. Here's a really good question that's going to be easy for me to answer. I'm not even clear what you KPIs. Thank you for that question. Sometimes I am guilty, as much as I try to hit everyone internally over the head of don't use acronyms. People don't understand acronyms across the board. KPIs is a fancy way of saying key performance indicators, and that could be things like business measures of success, such as bottom line business results, or turnover, or employee engagement, etc. Can you give us some examples of successful recognition and reward programs? There's lots of good examples. I'm trying to see what kind of industry this person who wrote the question is. It looks like maybe they're in manufacturing. So I'll give you an example of a manufacturing successful program. So DeFasco is a manufacturing customer of ours that we kind of always joke is one of our poster children of a successful program, in the sense that whenever they partnered with us, I guess it was 8 years ago, their executive team and the project team was honestly a little bit trepidatious about making this investment, because they're a 150-year-old company that's pretty traditional and top down. A lot of their employees work in factories, steel mills, etc. And they're we don't know if this is going to be something that, the blue-collar segment of our population is exactly going to embrace, the fluffiness of sending a recognition. However, within the first few months of going live, we were able to get them at over 95% adoption, and we were able to strategically sit down with them and map their safety program and incorporate it into their recognition program, meaning all of their employees were kind of rallied around those behaviors that prevent accidents. Whenever someone reported hazardous conditions, that recognition moment was amplified on the news feed, so that not just people within that particular plant could see it, but it was seen across, the corporate offices and the executive levels. And we were able to increase their safe working days record 65%, which translated into millions of dollars of cost savings and workers' comp claims and lost time to work, etc. So that would be an example of a successful recognition program, like the fact that, the average employee at Dofasco receives around 19 recognitions per year is great. That's wonderful in driving those kind of soft ROI metrics, like increasing the, fostering a culture of recognition. But the true tail sign of a effective, successful recognition program is when you can actually tie it to business results such as safety. Good. I know that we are at time. Everyone, I cannot thank you for your time and attention today. Please, if you have any other questions that you didn't have time to pop into the chat box, don't hesitate to reach out, and do me a favor and have an awesome rest of your week.
Great. Thanks, Brie. And ladies and gentlemen, that does conclude the audio portion of today's webinar. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a great day, everyone.